Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a rock star lineup ready for you all this Thursday morning. Emily Jashinsky and Andrew Feldman weigh in on the U.S. and China's plans to reduce carbon emissions. And we have infectious disease expert from Johns Hopkins with us to break down some of the latest data on the Delta variant. Plus, The Intercept's Ken Klippenstein discusses his new reporting on the Afghan resistance leaders that fled following the Taliban takeover.
But first, a government shutdown is on the horizon. According to Punchbowl, the Office of Management and Budget will send shutdown guidance today. This comes as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi begins adjusting Democrats' reconciliation bill. The Hill reports that Pelosi has signaled to Democrats in both chambers that she will not put the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package on the House floor for a vote until she can assure it will get passed through the Senate. Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Sinema have said they won't support the spending package at that $3.5 trillion level, but they haven't said publicly what they're willing to support. Pelosi also told Democrats in a Dear Colleague letter circulated Monday that she would not bring a reconciliation bill to the floor that spends more than what Manchin and Sinema are willing to accept, saying, quote, "I have promised members that we would not have House members vote for a bill with a higher top line than would be passed by the Senate." And so while this CNN chyron claims that progressives are at fault for tanking the Biden agenda, a leaked email revealed the dark money group No Labels praised Sinema for her heroic efforts in separating the infrastructure bill from the reconciliation package. And it told donors that the reconciliation bill can still be killed. So that was a story that I broke last night, that it injects a lot of cynicism and bitterness into this debate when you have the main financial backers of the opponents of the reconciliation bill, or of the progressive wing, saying publicly, not publicly, but semi-publicly, it's an email to a bunch of donors, they know it's probably going to leak, saying that, hey, we can still kill this reconciliation bill, because that undercuts the centrist messaging. The centrist messaging is supposed to be, no, we just want to pass the infrastructure bill now because we love infrastructure so much. We've got shovels, we got to get them in the ground. And we really love the reconciliation bill. We promise we won't do anything to it. And then privately, the groups that are backing them are like, oh yeah, get that infrastructure bill done so we can get to work on killing the Biden agenda.
It was essentially saying the silent part out loud, which you're really not supposed to do. But here's what's happening for Democrats, is basically you have a confluence of tough things that have to get through Congress on a certain deadline, all of which technically require spending money. We're authorizing money. So while many people are concerned with the top line number of $3.5 trillion, nothing to scoff at, you also are coming ahead with raising the debt ceiling. The Democrats are trying to turn it and say, well, raising the debt ceiling is really to deal with spending from the Trump era. It's money that's already out the door. What I would note is a little bit of pushback there is the money that was out the door was largely CARES funding. It was money that was authorized to, historic levels because we were dealing with a pandemic. It was passed with bipartisan support. But Republicans see it as a moment that this is a leverage point. They don't control either house of Congress, but their votes are needed to get this through. And I think McConnell's not going to blink. I think that this final stretch before the actual deadline, he's going to look for concessions. And I think it's going to end up coming from this massive package that Republicans largely aren't on board with.
So so the idea would be, OK, fine, we'll vote for the debt ceiling, but you have to take out school construction, or you have to take out.
My guess,
can't do these tax hikes, or what?
So the thing with the debt ceiling is everyone says, a lot of conservatives say they're not going to vote to raise it. But ultimately, McConnell's not going to let us default on the debt. We're not going to have our credit rating lowered. So he's going to look for other horse trading that he can, that can be communicated to the Republican conference as these are savings that we're getting. Where it comes from, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that it's going to come from either the top line number on the $3.5 trillion or some other major concession.
And so there's so much that's coming together right now. So this week, they have to pass the spending bill to avert a shutdown. People I was talking to on the Hill yesterday think that that's happening. Like that's pretty much in the bag. Like there's going to be some dancing around it, but they're going to get what they call, as they call it a four corners agreement. That's the two leaders in the House, the two leaders in the Senate. They agree, they move that through. So that's probably fine. Then they have to raise the debt ceiling so that they don't default. On Monday, they're voting or maybe not voting on this infrastructure bill. This is what the centrists are trying to get through. This is the kind of the hostage that progressives are holding up, saying if you want this infrastructure bill that you worked so hard on, you have to give us what we want too. And so that's what this no labels argument was about, saying we don't have the votes yet, and there's going to be jockeying for the rest of the week between progressives and conservative Democrats on who's going to blink first on this. And then after that, they have to finish reconciliation and they have to do the debt ceiling. What's your guess? I think Pelosi ends up not holding a vote. I think they'll put it on the floor on Monday. There will be debates back and forth. The promise that she made to them was that it would be considered. Considered normally means voted on. It's a loose term, though. And then the debate could go into Tuesday, and it will become evident that there are dozens of no votes. And at that point, you don't hold a vote to him because it'll embarrass Biden. He's taking too many
Correct.
blows
Considered being the operative word. And I know Pelosi has a press conference today, so I imagine she will get asked about that. Mm-hmm. But my guess is she won't bring up a bill that she knows is going to fail. She's a good vote counter. I will give her that. Now, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said that while the White House is concerned about a shutdown, their goal is to prevent that from happening. Let's watch.
What's the level of concern right now at the White House about the possibility of a government shutdown next week?
Well, until a CR has passed that funds the government, we'll certainly have a concern. But our goal and our focus is on preventing that from happening. Obviously, the House passed the CR with including raising the debt limit attached. The Senate could pass that today, and we could all rest easy. The government's not going to shut down. The American people could rest easy. We'll see what happens.
Has OMB started working on contingency plans for that possibility of a shutdown?
They're always working on contingency plans, but our focus is on preventing it from happening.
And several Republican lawmakers are taking a note from Mitch McConnell's playbook, standing firm in their position to vote against raising the debt ceiling.
So, are you willing to let the government shut down, all of you?
I am not going to vote to raise the debt ceiling. All right, this is the decision the Democrats are going to make. They have every vote they need to do this on their own. So if they decide to do that, I think it's a big mistake on their part, and I think it's bad for the country. But it's a decision they're making, not us.
You cannot screw around with the debt limit. It's one thing, even if you shut down government as bad as that is, that doesn't default America's credit like the debt limit does.
Well,
what does he mean by Democrats? I haven't quite gotten my head around this. What does he mean when he says Democrats have the votes to do this on their own? Does he mean they should end the filibuster and do it?
That's a great question. I mean, that would be the only way that that would make sense.
Technically, there are some people who say you can do it through reconciliation. That would take a long time and have to have a vote-a-rama, and it's a giant mess. But
so I come from the Adam Kinzinger school of thought where you do have to raise the debt limit. But I will say this. This is an analogy I came up with this morning. So in the same way my party, conservatives, often just ignore climate change. And they act like because I can't see it in the immediate future, it's just not there. I can punt dealing with it down the road. I would argue that progressives and Democrats do the same thing with the debt. It's just too big to even wrap your head around. They don't think about how the spending is actually some point going to come home to roost. China is buying our debt. We cannot just spend ourselves into oblivion and never deal with it. So to Republicans' credit, it is a moment to talk about where are we actually going to cut, because we're currently, careening toward a $3.5 trillion infrastructure package. So where are we going to be generating revenue? How are we going to pay down our debt? Haven't seen a good answer on that yet.
So it's an interesting analogy, but the problem is that you have it would be as if half of the scientific community, or at least say like a third, who would call them progressive or MMT climate scientists, said that no, actually carbon emissions are fine. There's nothing wrong with carbon emissions, because you can say like, look, the United States is the reserve currency. The dollar is the reserve currency, and these treasury bonds, which we call debt, they are debt, but they are also the currency for global capitalism, and so they are actually a source of our wealth rather than a source of any future impoverishment. And so you have, at this point, most of the party believes that to be the case. And when you're an empire, that is the case. It's kind of ugly that it's the progressive wing that is making its case for this global debt system, raising the standard of living of Americans on the back of the empire. But that's factually what it is.
It scares me to rely purely on what you're basically saying is fiat currency with no intrinsic value as the basis for our national financial system.
Conservatives have been scared of that since we went off the gold standard a long time ago. And it's actually like the Bitcoin is rooted somewhat in that fear. They're like, no, you can touch Bitcoin, you can connect it directly to a particular value. Yeah, people have a problem with fiat currency.
Well, we will have to leave it there, but we'll tell you what's on our radars next.